If you haven't experienced a catastrophic failure of one of your computer systems, then chances are either you haven't worked with computers long enough or you're extremely, extremely careful. Welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel, and this is Scott. Today the topic is entitled Catastrophic Recovery. A day ago, I had taken several updates on my Ubuntu 22.04 desktop. And here you can see that when I performed the sudo apt upgrade, I had a series of packages that were indicated that they had been held back. And I want you to notice that most of these updates involve the X server. Despite the fact that I'm running Ubuntu 22.04 and that Wayland is the default display manager, I'm using X Windows. And so that is a thing that should have been of great concern to me. So here's how I got in trouble. In the past, I've had updates that were held back or kept back. This time, as in others, I decided to install those updates with sudo apt install after having done the sudo apt upgrade. And when I've done that before, usually it's not a problem. Sometimes it may break an application that I discover further on down the road, and most of the time it just doesn't cause any issues whatsoever. So after a reboot, and that was several hours later because I was doing other work, in fact working on the video that was previous to this one, when I finally did reboot, I had no desktop GUI. So Ubuntu has a virtual terminal textual console that you can enter with Control-Alt-F5, where you should be prompted with a login. Actually, it has 7 different keys for virtual terminals, and they're Control-Alt-F1 through Control-Alt-F7. So Control-Alt-F7 is supposed to return to the GUI desktop. So I tried the Control-Alt-F5, then I tried the Control-Alt-F other things, and then ultimately Control-Alt-F7. And my Control-Alt-F5 did give me a blank screen, but it was a different blank screen than the blank screen that I had after the reboot with no GUI, and it had some corrupted graphics, and I'd say the top 1/4 of the screen, my attempts to hit the enter key and try to get any type of response from it were really unsuccessful. So how did I fix this, since I could not log in from the GUI and I also couldn't get a console prompt and log in from the console? So my magic fix goes back to my tutorial entitled Time Shift, where I discussed how to use the Time Shift utility to make nightly snapshots of the configuration of a system. And just as a reminder, here's the Time Shift GUI, and you can see that I was performing nightly backups, and I had one old backup there for nostalgia purposes, and then I had the previous 5 days of snapshots from my Ubuntu 22.04 desktop. So my conclusion here, or not really my conclusion, but my comment along the way, is that Time Shift definitely rocks. So the problem is I had no GUI and I also had no terminal, and I really wasn't in a convenient place where I could debug exactly what the problem was. Well, actually I was pretty aware of what it was because I had done a sudo apt install on all those X server components, and some conflict had been created on the system. And I tried the obvious, which was to get into the console and see if I could fix the problem. So ultimately, I grabbed my laptop, I went in the other room, and I logged into it, and I did an SSH to my broken desktop. And sure enough, the network was intact, and I was able to get a login prompt. And it did tell me that device NVMe 0N1P1, which is my root device on the affected desktop, would be error check next time it rebooted. So I went ahead and performed a reboot thinking, well, that might make some difference. And of course, it came back up running perfectly with no GUI desktop and, again, no ability to get into a console. So I did have a way to get to the system, and it was from this remote SSH from my laptop. So we were going to use time shift via SSH to solve this problem. So sorry about the eye chart here, but this is a command where I simply did a sudo time shift, and you can see all the command qualifiers that time shift provides, and time shift has a fully functional CLI as well as the GUI screen. So the first command I did was sudo timeshift --list, and it listed all of my snapshots and the snapshots for the 5 previous days. And knowing that the snapshot from the previous night was just fine, then I did a sudo timeshift -- restore and went into the GUI and said restore snapshot number 5, which was just from the previous night, not too many hours previous, and it went ahead and performed that restoration of that snapshot. So this exercise shows that despite a catastrophic update error, and I didn't even really have to know what the error was specifically, although I did know that it involved the X server, I was able to recover with the help of timeshift. I was amazed that despite no desktop and no textual console, that access via SSH was still operational, but that figured because I knew that the machine was really intact prior to this, and I knew that I would probably still have a working network. So timeshift performed the recovery of my configuration back to the previous snapshot, which was 24 hours previous. Actually, it wasn't even quite 24 hours previous, and that completed just fine. The recovery itself took about 30 minutes, and the SSH terminal session eventually indicated that the system was being rebooted upon completion. And so, again, I pointed out that it was an NVMe drive that was being restored from a snapshot on a spinning drive. And I suppose that I probably had right around 700 gigabytes of data. So the result was a fully functional system. Well, I hate to say this, but try that in Windows. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to hear about the next video.